The Old West had a way of turning men into legend. Billy the Kid and Doc Holliday were created by men who lived on after them. This is the story of a man who wrote his own legend, constructing it so well that almost the only accurate account of his life is found in the dusty pages of a court transcript. This is the story of Tom Mix, the myth on horseback. At the first dramatic motion picture ever made. It's called The Great Train Robbery and was produced in 1903 by Thomas Edison. It's a Western filmed on location in New Jersey. Somewhere in the cast of this epic is the first cowboy movie star. His name was Bronco Billy. He was a middle-aged vaudeville actor from Little Rock. During the first day's shooting, he fell off his horse, but he recovered enough to finish the picture and make 375 more just like it. By that time, there were dozens of cowboy heroes flickering across the silent screen. The simple Western became the original art form of the early movies. And led by the scowling image of Wes Hart, the newfound frontiersmen battled their way past the camera. The new movies and the already popular dime novels created a new image of the West, an image taken up enthusiastically by the new generation. It wasn't much like the West that was, but it was fun. The first Western movies were really imitations of the old Wild West shows, which by 1900 had been touring the nation for 10 years or more. Of these, the greatest was the Miller Brothers show, operating with a wealth of trained cowboys and horses, Western scenery, and even live Indians, told that the movie makers should seek out the Millers. By 1910, they were regular visitors to the ranch, and in that year, they came across the young man who was to become one of the great Western heroes of all time. They found him entertaining visitors to the Millers' Dude Ranch. His name was Tom Mix. It's difficult to trace the life of Tom Mix. He claimed to be a Texan, but was born in Pennsylvania. When he was 18, he joined the Army to fight in the Spanish-American War. He later claimed to be one of Teddy Roosevelt's Rough Riders, but he was in fact in the artillery. He went from Cuba to the Philippines and said he fought in China and Africa in the Boer War. Back in the States, he said he became sheriff of Washington County, Oklahoma, a deputy marshal, Indian agent, and Texas Ranger. We know he was night watchman at Dewey, Oklahoma, and Bartlesville, but the Texas Rangers have no record of him. In 1902, he was working at the Blue Belle Saloon in Guthrie, practicing riding on the side. But when the Oklahoma National Guard's Cavalry Band went marching down the street, Tom Mix was leading the way, wearing what must have been the biggest drum major's hat west of the Mississippi. It was one part of his life which never appeared in his later volumes of biography. About that time, Zach Miller hired him to entertain the dudes. Tom had worked hard at his riding, and if he didn't really punch the cattle on the lone prairie, he did know how to ride, and this gave him a decided advantage over most of the movie cowpokes of his day. The first Tom Mix Western was made in 1909 by the Selig Company, which had just lost the services of Bronco Billy. Selig hired Mix to be the hero of a film to be shot in Missouri. Shooting time was 1 month, an unheard of time when most films were finished in a week, some in a day. When shooting was over, the crew went back to Chicago, but when the finished film was released, they quickly came back and signed the star to a contract. For some reason, people preferred to watch Tom Mix. Soon more films were on the way. Throughout his career, Tom Mix swore that he never used a stuntman in his pictures. All the trick riding and rough and tumble, he did himself. And since every Western had to have at least one rousing chase and several miraculous escapes, the work must have been wearing. This sort of sequence, for example, was just run-of-the-mill. making his first picture for Selig, Tom Mix signed a new contract with William Fox, a contract which was soon paying him a handsome salary. His popularity rose, and by 1920, he'd replaced William S. Hart as king of the Cowboys. Hart had insisted on making realistic westerns, showing the Old West as it really was. The audience evidently preferred fantasy, and that's what Mix provided. His cowboy heroes gradually punched fewer and fewer cows, and then no cows at all. From the simple plains garb, fancier and fancier outfits evolved, until the hero was just a dashing stereotype who could have been King Arthur or Robin Hood. The society in which he moved was just as foreign to the real West as the hero, but it made a splendid backdrop for his adventures. Will Rogers had known Tom when he worked at the 101, and he explained the Mix formula for making movies. Tom's smart like Henry Ford, he said. He makes what the people want. You never hear him talking about bigger and better pictures. He uses the same old recipe. Little love, little danger, not so much story, not so much preaching. He never tries to outmix Tom Mix. Tom knows if he surpasses his last picture, he'll have to surpass the next one. Will had the formula down pat. There was adventure and danger, and there was a little love, though most of it was rather carefully suggested rather than demonstrated. It became a Western rule that cowboys just had so much respect for girls that they didn't go around kissing them. The cowboys were a little confused by feminine ways, and when it was absolutely necessary to go within touching distance of one of the petticoated creatures, it was wise to be on your guard, like maybe you were being stalked by a band of Cheyenne. And if the cowboy just had to be around a girl, it was absolutely imperative to take a chaperone. His horse. With the cowboy's horse taking such an active part in his life, it was only natural that the horse should become a kind of extension of his master. Such was the case with Tom Mix. His horse was Tony, and there wasn't anyone who couldn't connect the two names. Like his master, Tony used no doubles, and in the many spills, he often came off better. When Tom was recovering from an injury, Tony came around to offer sympathy. The fact that he hitchhiked over with a publicity agent from the studio was of no particular importance. The relationship between cowboy and horse was satisfying to Tom's young fans, but they might have been disappointed by some of the behind-the-scenes facts. In 1929, Tom gave Tony away to his horse trainer to avoid the possibility of losing him in a lawsuit. No one knew, of course, for Tom continued to ride the faithful horse until the end of his life. Even while he was climbing to the top of the movie world, Tom Mix kept thinking of taking another crack at a Wild West show. He remembered his days with the 101 Ranch Show, of the days when the show played before thousands, traveled over the United States and Europe, and moved in great gilded caravans of wagons and wild animals. He had tried his hand at circus work, and he needed the roar of applause to make his life complete. He made the attempt several times, but the shows never quite worked out. He never achieved the success of the Miller Brothers, even though his name was far better known through his movies. And when the circus adventures soured, that's where he returned. Ready with another batch of movies with a little love, a little danger, not so much preaching, and an awful lot of money. In the late 1920s, the Tom Mix movies were earning their star the amazing sum of $20,000 a week. Tom developed a style of living which would have impressed even the great cattle barons of the West. He constructed a vast 6-acre estate in Hollywood that surpassed even Mary Pickford's home. A winding road led to an immense stucco house, which was surrounded by a tennis court, swimming pool, a 7-car garage, and of course a stable for Tony. Inside, there was a glass-enclosed foyer and a huge 2-story trophy room filled with expensive saddles, carvings, Indian relics, antique guns, and bows and arrows. But despite this, Tom was obviously not happy. He often disappeared at the height of large parties, leaving his guests to carry on alone. He explained that when he got tired, he went to bed. "My guests are my friends," he said, "and if they don't like it, they won't come back. Friends don't disapprove." And when he was depressed, he would talk about the disappointments of his good fortune. "People come and see this big house and all these things," he said, "and they say, 'Gee, it must be great to be rich and have everyone know you and all that.' And then sadly he would say, 'But I often tell them it ain't nothing like it's cracked up to be. A fellow can only sleep in one bed at a time and only wear one shirt and even ride only one horse.' But while he found his surroundings unsatisfying, these had been his goals, and having achieved them, he could think of no others. With the increase in his personal fortune, there came also an increase in his business assets. The Fox Film Company was well aware of the importance of Tom Mix to their studio, and they constructed a special studio complex designed strictly for westerns. The location was near Edendale, California, and it was called Mixville. Within its fence was anything a western producer could want. There was a frontier town with a jail, saloon, and dusty street. Nearby was an Indian village and a stretch of make-believe desert. To Mixville came visitors, including this group of dignitaries, as a kind of early-day Disneyland. Often they were treated to an exhibition of western riding and shooting, for Tom still craved the applause of the crowd and spent endless hours practicing so that he might receive it. The films made at Mixville were a little more complicated than the early models, but the basic format was the same. Once a scriptwriter presented Tom with a novel approach and was quickly rejected. "The kids wouldn't understand," Tom said. "You've got me drinking and gambling. I can't do anything the boys and girls don't expect of me. The role I play has to be a man of high ideals." He maintained the high ideals in his films, but his private life was a different matter. During a court trial, he was accused of being drunk on a particular occasion. He denied it and said, "I don't think a man is ever drunk until he has to hold on to the grass to keep from falling down." "It was Christmas Day," he added. "I thought it was kind of patriotic." But by this time, the mythical Tom Mix had overpowered the real man. And if his fans knew of his personal failings, well, they ignored them. His popularity was as great as ever as he strode again and again down the streets of Mixville, bringing justice to a troubled and wholly imaginary town. The end of the 20s brought major changes to Tom Mix. With the stock market crash, he lost much of his fortune. Thousands of dollars had been put into worthless stocks. And when the talkies came in, the king of the Cowboys decided to call it quits. Tom went back to the road, traveling from town to town, doing the one thing he preferred, working in a circus. This time, he was a headliner in the Sells-Floto Circus, one of the strongest competitors to Zack Miller's 101 Ranch show. For the services of the king of the Cowboys, Sells-Floto paid $20,000 a week and also provided him with a private railroad car. This had its practical advantages when so much traveling was involved, but as a status symbol, the private railroad car had hardly any equal. There was also a private railroad car for Tony. Though he was over 50 years old, Tom entered the circus routine with complete enthusiasm, and for 3 years enjoyed booming success traveling across the nation, always to the ringing cheers of the multitudes. There was one sour note. Zach Miller of the 101 claimed Mix had first promised to go with him and sued for breach of contract. After a long and bitter contest, Zach won a judgment of $66,000, but there's no record of how much was actually paid, for by then, Mix had little cash. Then one day there came a new movie offer, a chance to return to Hollywood and prove that Westerns were just as good with talking as they were without. Tom, Mix, and Tony accepted the offer almost at once. There weren't many movies in the new series. They were still popular, though, and by now there was a new generation to appreciate them.
You really think you know him, Colonel? You can walk out. Looked like a trick to me. Casino? Hornsby is the head of that gang, isn't he? What? Hornsby. Hey, some of you fellas sit around there behind that house. There's a gang come up over the pine. They're from Silver City. I know some of them. Monroe couldn't have got there, in fact. I'm getting out of here right now, man. Get on the right double. Well, I guess we had plenty of action around here today, didn't we? Well, we got everybody tied up that needs tying. Why, hello, Colonel. Where have you been? Why, Get up here. I told you not to try anything on this fella. Congratulations, Monroe. That was a clever trick. But did you ever see this one? Why,
There were other entertainment ventures to carry the Mix name, too. Along with talkies in the theater, there were now talkies in the home, radio. 5 days a week, the Tom Mix radio program inspired a whole new series of adventures which could be easily transferred to the nearest backyard by any listener, provided he was young enough.
Outside a lonely and abandoned trapper's cabin in the woods near Three Forks, Ed Walcott has demonstrated his priceless working model of the rocket parachute to that mountain of flesh, the the criminal known as Diamond, only to have lost it high above the treetops. As we join them now, Diamonds is forcing Ed back to the cabin to build another rocket. Unknown to them, Tom Mix is waiting for them there. Listen as Ed says.
Here's the cabin. You'd better come in and cool off, Diamond. And I'd appreciate it if you'd take that gun out of my back.
Once we're inside, go ahead. Your wife must be in the other room. Griselda, come out here at once. Something frightful has happened. Something most unexpected.
Something most unexpected, Diamond.
What's the name of Mix? Tom Mix!
Tom! Drop that gun, Diamond!
Oh!
I said drop it, not raise it. Shooting it out of his hand saves me the trouble of taking it away from him.
How? How?
How did we find your hideout? This.
The rocket parachute. The working model of the rocket parachute. Oh, Tom!
I was searching for you through the woods when I saw the rocket parachute floating over the trees.
The wind caught it after I shot it into the air.
Yeah, I know. Afraid I broke some of the strings when I tried to bring it down, Ed, but I reckon you can fix that easily enough.
You bet I can, Tom. In fact, I'm going to have lots of working models.
Well, I reckon this is the end of the trail for you, Diamonds.
I wouldn't be too sure, Mix.
Empty words, Diamonds. This time we got you with a good.
Oh, yes. Quite. You got me, Mix. The question is, can you keep me?
Strange and exciting things happen tomorrow. So don't fail to be with Tom Mix for the next episode of Mysterious Parachute. Straight shooters, you'll get a tremendous thrill out of this sensational rocket parachute Tom Mix is offering to send you. Just imagine being the very first in your neighborhood to own this amazing model. There's nothing to assemble.
But time was catching up with the king of the Cowboys. There had always been minor injuries during the filming of his daring horseback tricks. Now they took longer to heal. Finally, Tom Mix retired from the movies for good. He went back to the circus, this time with a show of his own. It was probably the worst decision of his life, for the depression was at its depth. The show consistently lost money, and when the crowds didn't come anymore, the legend of Tom Mix was approaching its end. Tom Mix died on October 12, 1940, at the age of 60. For a man who had risked life and limb in so many dangerous situations, it was a death of anticlimax. He was speeding along an Arizona highway in one of his powerful sports cars. There was a sudden detour, and as he turned to follow it, a heavy suitcase broke loose behind the seat and crashed forward. He died instantly of a broken neck. Tony outlived his master by 4 years, until finally, too old and sick to enjoy his green pastures, he was put to sleep at the age of 34. Today, a small statue of a sorrowing horse marks the place of Tom's death in Arizona. The real monument, of course, is the myth. There is little of reality to the myth, but to a man like Tom Mix, it is better than not being remembered at all.